Money FM 89.3, the best of the afternoon update. Viewpoint.
Very good afternoon to you. It's Lynlee with you. Now, we've all heard the stories. Fathers who quietly skip their paternity leave even though they're entitled to it because they worry about what the boss might think. Will colleagues see them as less committed? Will it hurt their career in the long run? These are the kinds of unspoken worries that might explain why, despite expanded policies, Singapore's paternity leave take-up still sits at just 56%. That's according to the Family Trends Report 2025 released this week. That is progress, but it still means nearly half of fathers here aren't using the leave available to them. Why is that? And what will it take for workplaces and families to truly normalise caregiving roles for fathers? Joining us to help unpack these questions is Dr. Kalpana Vignehsa, Senior Research Fellow at the Institute of Policy Studies at the National University of Singapore. Kalpana, welcome to Viewpoint.
Thank you, Lynlee.
Now, Kalpana, you've studied and are very familiar with family trends and workplace norms here in Singapore. So let's start with that big number from the Ministry of Social and Family Development's latest Family Trends Report, 56%. That's better than where we were a few years ago. I think it was 53% in 2022.
53.
Yeah,
correct.
But some would say we're seeing signs of a plateau. So do you think we're approaching a kind of ceiling here where policies alone can't push take-up much further?
No, not at all. I think we're still quite a far way off kind of saying that, there's not much more to do. Because we really, at the moment we offer 1 month of paternity leave, which is wonderful compared to 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. But we are still quite a way off a policy-enabled vision of parents who are equally involved in the early and tender years of a child's life.
Okay.
So I have the view that there's more work to be done.
Okay, but how do you explain this very slow, growth from 53 to 56%?
I think it's, there's a lot of societal change that has to happen. Mm-hmm. And policy change and societal change go hand in hand. They're affected by one another. There was a time when even taking maternity leave was a no-no. It was like if you're going to be a working woman, then where do children fit into this? But we have a completely different viewpoint of maternity leave now, and there's a lot more acceptance around that. So I don't think that, yes, it feels like a plateau, but I don't think that means that we can't shift it.
Okay. It will be enhanced to 4 weeks in April to encourage greater paternal involvement in childcare. So I wonder, through your research or even just conversations, have you come across stories from fathers themselves about why they did or didn't take their leave? Anything that really illustrates what's going on the ground?
I think that fathers who are sort of, aware of the research or influenced by what's happening around them, maybe their friends are also paying more attention to being more involved fathers. I think we can say, looking around, even from 10 years ago, you will see many more involved fathers in Singapore tending to young children. So I'd say that there is kind of a landscape shift happening. Mm-hmm. But it is also very true that fathers do face penalties for taking paternity leave. They do face a backlash. So I think it's very real. I actually sort of see this as not so much. I think the problem is that the workplace culture has to shift. I feel like fathers are shifting their priors and shifting their perceptions and doing more, but they have to counter the reality of what they perceive will happen to their careers or how their workplace will receive their desire to take paternity leave.
So you think even though leave is officially available, many fathers still feel there is an unspoken penalty, right? Being seen as less committed, passed over for opportunities. That is pretty much what's happening. And you think that does influence decisions?
Yes, I think it does influence decisions about whether or not they're going to take that paternity leave and whether or not they take the full paternity leave. So one thing to note about this data is that it's not 56% taking the full 2 weeks, right? Mm-hmm. So the percentage actually taking the full 2 weeks will be a smaller percent of that. So it really is something that we have to move slowly on, and I do feel that shifting workplace culture really is paramount. That is the big thing that we need to work on.
Okay, definitely something legislation can't really fix. But let's talk more about that. You say workplace culture. Do you mean it has to come from managers, leaders?
Yes, I think that, there has to be a general sense in which that we really elevate and celebrate parenting. And because I think, there was a recent New York Times article talking about the huge opportunity cost of becoming a parent and how society hasn't quite caught up to thinking that, parents are performing a huge public service and a contribution to society that everyone benefits from, whether it's in the form of new taxpayers or young people who go on to serve the population or indeed solve intractable problems with their new ways of seeing the world that just older generations can't. So I think that leadership of companies, leaders in the public sphere, they really need to kind of celebrate the fact that parents want to be involved and make it possible for them. I have written, and when I talk about this, people often might get the impression that I'm just talking about elevating parents, but I've written about making it the norm that you remunerate colleagues who step in to pick up the slack when parents take parental leave. And policy-wise, if we expand entitlements for both paid and unpaid leave, we can support the development of a leave cover industry where people are available for 6 months to 2-year positions to cover parental leave. With short leave provisions, we cannot really develop this industry. But the countries that do have these leave cover systems where there's a pool of people wanting these shorter term contract positions, what they have is they have provisions for longer leave. So there are just more people in the system wanting those types of jobs. And this can be great for companies too, because they get to try new employees out. If they're a good fit, they can find other roles for them. And there's also a lot of research out there that shows that there are benefits to the company that support, parents taking leave because they feel more loyal to the company and stuff like that.
This sounds really good because it actually fosters a culture of flexibility every day at the workplace. So do you see differences depending on which sector or type of workplace we're talking about? For example, SMEs versus large corporations, or even blue-collar versus white-collar workers? Are the barriers to taking leave more pronounced in certain groups? Definitely.
There is a difference between how much flexibility SMEs can offer versus large MNCs. There's definitely a higher take-up in white-collar jobs as opposed to blue-collar jobs. And, I think that this is another area for policy to step in because we know, there's been data that has come out in the Singapore context that paternity leave contributes to fewer behavioral problems, better test scores, improved family relationships, higher marital satisfaction. And given that blue-collar workers are less likely to apply for it because of their job concerns, that's a clear area where policy can step in and really support them further to be there for their children. They might need additional support from the government in that sense.
Okay. Well, it's definitely, we need more solutions that may need to be more targeted instead of one size fits all, But easier said than done, of course. Singapore has taken a very policy-driven approach so far. We're seeing things like mandating leave, expanding entitlements. But do you think we've perhaps under-focused on shifting cultural and gender norms? And what more needs to happen outside of legislation?
So I think that in Singapore, we lean on policy and we don't quite lean so much on talking up the type of change we want to see. It's a bit more laissez-faire, families will figure it out. That said, I think that actually educational and generational change is happening. That train has already left the station. What we can do, I think that thinking about the additional stuff that can be done, I would say would be adult education. So, for example, we don't maximize those opportunities. When parents first find out they are pregnant, they're going through a time of great transformation in their lives. And in many other countries, what they do is they actually say the father and the mother, so not just the mother, have to come in for antenatal classes. Then they take the fathers aside and they actually give them a lot more education as well, specific to being fathers. So that is an interesting opportunity that we don't do anything with at the moment, where if you want to accelerate change, you want to create that cultural change, you kind of also want to communicate communicate to new fathers what's at stake, what they could be giving their families if they are more involved, if they participate in certain ways, etc. And that, can accelerate cultural change. So I think there are still things that we can do that aren't, strictly speaking, enforcing, you have to do this or you have to do that way, but rather just helping people understand why are we going on about this.
Yeah, I do see how that can happen in campaigns, education, workplace initiatives even. All of those can easily reinforce the idea that caregiving is just as much a father's role, right? So,
exactly.
Kalpana, what does success look like to you? Should we really be aiming for perhaps 100% of fathers to take the full leave? Or is it more about raising take-up where the gaps are widest for certain groups or industries?
Okay, so I would say, this is just my personal way of looking at it, right? I'm not sure that we'll ever get to 100%, but perhaps a similar take-up rate between mothers and fathers is a good goal to aspire to. Mm-hmm. And also, fathers taking the full entitlement as opposed to partial entitlement, I think is a big part of it as well, another big goal to aspire to, because it really does make a big difference to the children and to their own relationships within the home as well.
Okay.
So that's how I would look at that. And then, of course, like I mentioned, supporting lower-income families where the take-up is generally lower. Mm-hmm. I feel like these are good ways to think about what might be, okay, we're doing well.
Okay. So more about making meaningful benchmarks rather than chasing a perfect number, I suppose.
Correct.
Okay. And finally, looking ahead, if we get this right, what do you hope Singapore's workplaces and families will look like? I'm thinking maybe 5 years from now in 2030?
Well, I'm really hoping that, we just continue to grow. We continue to see the growth of parents taking sort of an even responsibility for parenting in the early years, because we have plenty of data that that's really, really important for children and important for families and family satisfaction. I think in the workplace, I think that it doesn't have to be this case where you feel like I can't both have a fulfilling career and also have a fulfilling family life, because there's a lot that can be achieved with flexibility and understanding. We are moving away from, some days I think we're moving away, and then some days I hear news that we're moving backwards. But I'm hoping for more of a shift away from presenteeism to, are we adding value? Are we getting the work that we need to get done? And, if we can have full, happy family lives alongside that, then that's the goal, not a case of it has to be one or the other.
Okay, thank you so much. I think it really underscores how this is about more than just policy. It's about shaping workplaces, homes, and more importantly, probably most importantly, the mindsets to truly support families.
It truly is, yes. We are in the business of shifting mindsets, and I think I really hope that we do see more of that happening in the next 5 years. Yeah.
Kalpana, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your expertise and perspective.
Thank you so much, Lynlee.
She is Dr. Kalpana Vignehsa from the Institute of Policy Studies at NUS. You've been listening to Viewpoint. I'm Lynlee. Stay with us here on Money FM 89.3.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.